great silent majority.
San Fernando has always had a strong political presence and organization going back to the 50s. And it evolved and exploded into the 60s with the student involvement. They just took it to another level. Yeah, there was massive demonstrations going on globally. They might not have been connected directly with what, like civil rights, but they were connected with wage issues, living issues.
That was the era of the Vietnam protest. And when you look historically at the Vietnam War, and you see the casualty list, who were they? They were people of color.
All hell was breaking loose here. Vietnam War, civil rights, access to campuses. It was, it was just all this energy happening, man. World turmoil, man, and all being driven by students or young people. All being driven by that.
People talk of the San Fernando Valley as a white suburban area, but when you look at it demographically, there was still a sizable population. Now that it's growing, there's no denying that we exist, and we weren't the hidden minority, we're the hidden faces.
But when we were growing up, it was mostly white. And when we went to school, most of the students were white. So we experienced a lot of discrimination.
To be openly racist, to be openly classist, to reveal inner and outer hatreds in a classroom setting was common.
I don't know why they let people like him go to our school anyway, and I'm not the only one.
When it came down to graduation, we weren't supposed to go to college. We had our place.
We were being discouraged, from going to college. It never entered my mind. I mean, I did not think, I was convinced based on what they told me that I couldn't attend a 4-year.
They had a counselor who would tell all of us to look into becoming secretaries, not even teachers, secretaries, or doing, menial jobs. The guys were all told to go to the Air Force or the Army.
The Chicano students were all being told that they could not make it in college, regardless of what their grades were.
And in fact, it was even trouble, if you know the area, crossing Balboa, because you weren't really welcome on this side of town or cross. And if you were crossing the valley, you better not stop, put gas or anything. You better have a full tank of gas, skip from the Northeast Valley to the West Valley, because you were crossing right through the middle of white suburbia. And this is where this university was located.
Valley State was basically a commuter campus. There was no on-campus dormitories. People commuted or lived in apartments, and there was not an apartment complex of what you see now. If you look at basically any land north of the university, east of the university, there was nothing there.
The university itself, however, was very, very white, outside and inside.
It was basically a lily white university, and they wanted to keep it that way.
Coming to the campus the first time was actually quite a shock, because when I came to campus and looked around, There was no one that looked like me, the students attending. I could see there was more custodial staff, groundskeepers that would look like me, but none of the students.
One of the things that was very, very glaring was that the absence of Mexican American students. You just couldn't see them. In fact, you couldn't see even black students.
And next to me in 1967, next to me sat Beto Ruiz. We finally developed a conversation and developed a kind of a friendship. And actually our meeting place and time was basically the cafeteria, which is where the current bookstore is, because I used to actually be the cafeteria. And we would hang out in one corner, one table.
At first socialized, and then we kind of dedicated more, specific time to organize and to plan.
And we organized eventually United Mexican American Students. We chartered the organization, and it becomes the Chicano student organization on campus.
I want to say that when we chartered the organization on campus, we needed something like 30 signatures of students. That was the rules for all charter organizations. We couldn't get 30 Chicanos. We didn't have them. So we needed sympathetic white Anglo students who were, wanting to help us out and get this organization started. And I believe our first faculty advisors were Warren Furumoto and I think Julian Nava.
Some of them approached me. They saw I was a Mexican. I said, sure, it's a great idea. How can I help? I wasn't as socially active with them as you might imagine, although I met with them at the cafeteria and met with them and talked to them after class and tried to find out who they were and to encourage them.
And of course, it was a milieu or an environment at that time where an awful lot of white students were extraordinarily angry with the administration. So we had a lot of white students who were extraordinarily sympathetic with our plan. And we got a lot of assistance from them, a lot of support from them. I think had not been that, that it would have been a lot more difficult to implement any programs, because with the majority of white students and Jewish students and black students and Hispanic students, I think that it kind of built a big tide, and the administration could not really straighten its face. It had to deal with it.
In those years, we're talking about, recruiting more students, getting more Chicano students on this campus. How we're going to do it, Eventually, this EOP idea starts to develop, and actually, the idea of EOP starts before the department bringing students here.
Because up to that, we were recruiting on our own. We started before EOP to go out in that community and get into the schools to talk to students. The schools that would let us, because once we shared that we were UMAS, it was difficult to sometimes have access, as much as we were doing something as innocent as recruiting students for higher education.
We started getting community people coming to support our request for a greater amount of Hispanic students into the university. At that time, we were not even thinking of establishing a Chicano Studies department. Primarily what we wanted was inclusion. We wanted students at the university learning. And when you saw the numbers, they were dismal. When I first attended this university, I think that the Hispanics were less than 1% of the total population. And we were approximately 24 students out of that. So if you do the math, it's infinitesimally small. It's less than 1% of 1%. So we wanted to change that. We looked into an awful lot of things that the university was doing. And we realized that they had special admissions for other students, such as athletes or people with special drama or musical talents. So we figured if they could admit 500 or 600 special ed students, they could admit 500 or 1,000 Chicano students at the same level. And if they could succeed, these kids could succeed too. So that was our idea. And that's the ideas we presented.
And that's how we brought in just under 100 students in 1968.
It was an evening, I was having dinner with my parents. The phone rings, so I pick up the phone, and there's the guy on the phone says, "My name is Dwight Harris, and I know you applied to San Fernando Valley State College. Are you interested in coming?" And I said, "Well, yeah." And he says, "Well, we have a summer program, but you got to be here tonight." I said, "Whoa!" I said, "What?" You know. And then my mom wanted me to go. "This is a great opportunity. You should do it." My dad said, "Well, how are you going to get there? You don't have a car." Blah 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 blah. So, you know, I packed a couple of grocery bags with clothes and some food. My dad drove me to Zelza, dropped me off.
A recruiter, a Chicana recruiter, and a Chicano came to my high school. And the Chicana's name was Rebecca Villegas. And they requested a meeting with the Chicano students at Poly. She made a pitch that was incredible to us about the opportunity of college, what it meant, that this program was going to assist us, that even if our parents didn't have the money, which most of us did not, I think all of us did not have the resources to attend college, but even then the program was going to help us. She made that clear, and I was so impressed by her because she was a graduate from my high school and grew up in the neighborhood close to mine. When my mother dropped me off, she was crying when she dropped me off at the dorm, and she thought, she was so worried everything terrible was going to happen to me. And so in a way it was frightening. I mean, it was the first time I was 18 years old. And so it was frightening at the same time. It was exciting. It was an opportunity. And I had already I already knew one person that I really liked, Rebecca Villegas. And so that helped a lot, knowing that she was somebody who experienced what I had.
Later I found out during the course of the program that they had convinced the university in some way, shape, or form to have a summer bridge program in anticipation of what eventually became the Educational Opportunity Program. And through that time, I started to get to know all of the Chicanos. At that time, they were all seniors. I learned that they represented UMAS.
And that's who I was mentored by. And people like Miguel Verdugo, Frank DeLolmo, who became the associate editor of the LA Times. He was one of my mentors then. Very shy person, but brilliant. And Raul Aragon, very nice person. These were nice people who were around and helped us. And anytime I had questions and listening to the discussions that this group had, Rebecca was extremely intelligent and outspoken, and to be there and listen to it and sometimes participate in these discussions was an incredible experience.
It was a real good, comfortable sense because you were surrounded and having lunch with people that could speak Spanish. You know, you could understand what they were talking about. Beto in particular taught me a lot about the farm worker plight. And so I started to join the boycotts, boycotting Vons and Safeway. And those were real eye-opening experiences because, you know, when you're trying to convince people to support the farm workers, and they walk in the store, walk out of the store with a handful of grapes and eat them in front of your face, you know, that's pretty tough to take at that time.
And some of us, of course, started to, in a sense, identify with that struggle that the farm workers were onto. And some of us came from that background. I mean, as farm workers, and myself included. And we knew that there was a legitimate, struggle. It was here in San Fernando as well, where one market where the management took out tables in front of the market and was giving grapes away. Now, they never do that, of course. It was to tease us, antagonize us. And it did antagonize us. And there was a man who told us on the picket line there, he says something like, if we were in Texas, we probably would hang you, people like you. Wow, well, I sure don't want to go to Texas to find out, I had not been exposed to that much antagonism, shall we say so. Some of us had found it really difficult to hold ourselves back, but I would see the farm workers, and they would be the greatest of examples to us to show us what to take seriously or how to deal with that kind of situation. They were used to it, and they had control. It didn't surprise them that would take place, but some of us were learning about it for the first time.
While there was the anger at racism, when I heard Cesar Chavez and learned of the United Farm Workers and of his methods, that transformed me. Because he said that if you're willing to organize and you're willing to unite and you're willing to do it nonviolently, we can change the world. And si se puede. That changed my life. Suddenly, even though I was very upset about the discrimination and racism, suddenly there's the light. There's the way we can overcome it. And I learned that here. I learned that by hearing Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta on this campus.
We also were concerned now that we really did not have curriculum on this campus that was relevant to the students. We were concerned about that their performance might be impacted by not finding their presence or their visibility in the curriculum of our courses.
Once I hit the fall semester, I began to understand what they were talking about, because I would walk into a speech class or an English class, and I looked to my right, I looked to my left, I was the only Chicano in it. Especially the speech class. I mean, that was a scary speech class because, I know I have an accent, but it was very scary to walk around a campus like this and only being the only Chicano in the classes. I remember a lot of conversations went on in terms of the experimental college, where anyone could literally develop a curriculum and offer a course through experimental college. Now, what is the experimental college? Well, any building of the university, you could go any building, any floor that was available, and if you submitted your proposed course, you could teach it. And students literally at that time would gravitate to those classes. So you had classes about everything that you can imagine. And I remember some of the UMAS leadership going ahead, and some of the African American leadership, the BSU leadership also, going ahead and developing curriculum based on material that we had never been exposed to.
And we started to invite different speakers who would come and speak to us. But there's one gentleman, and he would come and lecture to us. His name was Rudy Acuna. So coming on his own, we paid no funds. It was just a study group. We got no units. The students got no units, the professors and the speakers. This is all coming from your, corazón. And we realized, the more we heard, the more hunger we had for hearing about something called Chicano history.
And so that's why we wanted to have eventually classes, courses that included the Chicanos' role in America. And we found little, interest on the part of the academic departments to do that. And so while we're finding that resistance, we're experiencing a lot of motivation through the experimental college class and through the presentations of, Rudy Acuna and through other speakers, there where we're getting ideas about eventually having them to work for a department and that would impart those kinds of courses or classes.
There was a game, and there was a fight among the football players of the two teams involving one black player from our school, our university, and one of the coaches got real mad and went out in the field and pulled that black kid away from the fracas and kicked him in the butt and told him to get off the field. That led to wholesale, most of the blacks decided to quit the team. And then they started agitating because they said they wanted the university to fire that coach and all that kind of stuff. And so they started really stepping it up, and every place they turned to, someone said, "Oh, I'm not responsible, to go see somebody else." And finally they got so mad that they decided that they would confront the athletic director, who was actually the chair of the physical education department, and demand that they fire that coach. The athletic director says, "I can't fire the coach." Then why not? Because he's a volunteer and I can't fire volunteers. The black students had demanded that they would meet with the athletic director over there where the PE department is right now, and have a meeting between a few of the blacks, the black leadership, and him to discuss this issue. And they heard the same rhetoric. He couldn't do anything about it. So they asked him, who can do anything about it? He says, well, the person who can really do it is the president of the university. So they said, okay, let's go see him. So they took him, said, come with us, we'll go walk over the administration of the PE department to the administration building, which is now the student services building. They walked over there, and I remember that, looking out of the window from the science department and seeing all those, Jesus, how come all these black kids are together and they're walking down the walkway there? And I didn't think anything about it. But that was November 4th. And they went over there and they took over the whole building.
The moment they left the president's office, the president revoked whatever he signed because he claimed it was all under duress, that he was being held against his will.
And that night, they were arrested, one by one, picked off. The sentence was sort of like 25 years and stuff like that. And they really pulled some hard time. Fortunately, about a year afterwards, they went through the whole appeals process and they found out that the judge was wrong and stuff, so they got cut loose on technicalities. November 4th completely changed the dynamic in this university. That one time when it was all white student-led demonstration for white students fighting against the war, now became fighting for the black students and fighting for the demands. In all this kind of stuff, for the Chicano students that were here, it was kind of like, for them, very, very frustrating in a sense, because they see all this thing, but for them to get involved with white students or with black students, it's not easy. This kind of stuff was really brand new for them. How do you interact with these other students and not having the right kind of rhetoric and the right words to use is very intimidating. I know it was. But nevertheless, you know, kind of like out of the frustration, they felt that they had to do something.
We were demanding that the president still honor and create and establish and support an educational opportunity program to bring educational equity to this campus.
In January, after the 68, after the year was over, on January 8th, we had the large demonstration.
It was kind of interesting because when you were on the outside looking in, you couldn't see that the cops were in there because it was like a mirror, one-way mirror. They could see what we were doing. And I just could surmise from what happened that the cops were in there picking out who they were going to go after. Suddenly, as I recall, the brick came out of the group of students toward the glass door of the administration building. As soon as that thing hit, the damn doors just flung open. And this mass of cops came charging out, and they went after only the black students. People in the back were trying to run, and people in the front trying to run, and people were in their way, and it was just a mess. No more than maybe 10 yards away from me that 3 or 4 cops just went after this one black kid and beat the shit out of him and put a baton in his eye and actually blinded his eye. Just blood all over the place.
I ran real fast. Got away and just totally surprised that they would take an action like that. And they were, going to be that aggressive, and some moment to panic and get emotional. Just got off from at a distance to look back and see what was happening. Trying to understand what was happening.
That was sort of like the last straw. Everybody was so upset. And what do you do, in this situation?
So on the next day, we went to campus. We find out that a state of emergency was declared for the campus.
Right adjacent to the now bookstore, which used to be the cafeteria, where they had a platform, and whenever students wanted to speak, they would go to the open forum and speak. And if people wanted to listen to them, they'd sit there and listen to them.
I couldn't believe it then. When I came on campus there were cop cars all along Nordhoff, all up Lindy Avenue and along up Darby. I had never seen that many cop cars in one place in all my life, and still to this day I haven't seen that many. Just like all parked next to each other.
And so our reaction was we continued with the meeting.
could actually see that students were determined, to change the culture of the institution. The institution wasn't ready for change. They didn't know any other way of handling other than calling the police.
I think a lot of people started to feel that on January 9th, it had reached a level, the tension and all, that it had to be addressed. Something had to be done to bring this campus back together.
The very next day, the faculty senate had a meeting, emergency meeting, to discuss what had happened. I did not attend that because I felt, I was just like so mad about everything, and I didn't think I could stand listening to any more racist rhetoric. But to my amazement, what my colleagues told me was that just immediately faculty stood up and said, look, this shit can't happen anymore. We just gotta do something.
And we became sort of like the mediators trying to work with our Chicano students in terms of, I guess, calming the situation, seeing where we could start really communicating and getting some results.
Delmar Oviet, not very sympathetic with our plight at all. I mean, his position was, if you want to come to this university, you come to this university like everybody else. And he was not at all in favor of admitting Hispanic or Black students on special admissions or providing them with any kind of assistance.
Our role was to see how we could make those demands a reality by sort of being the intermediary, like talking to the administration and say, well, listen, there is a need to support a Chicano Studies program, and yes, there is a need to have a EOP program. Look at the figures. We would play the role of advocates for the students, and yet not being students.
The faculty voted almost unanimously to tell the president, the acting president, that he should start negotiations with the students.
So out of that came what is called the 12-point agreement. And in that 12-point agreement was the establishment, one of the points was the establishment of Pan-African Studies Department. The establishment of a Mexican-American Studies Department. That's what it was called at first. There were other points to the 12-point agreement as well.
So I think after that, I think we had clear sailing to some degree. And the question now was of hiring people that could develop the curriculum. Some of the students at that time were toying with the idea of hiring one of us to start the program, develop the curriculum, start the classes, as the Blacks had done. I mean, they hired one of their own, one of the student leaders, to become chairman of Pan-African Studies. And I think that we kind of thought about it, and we put our egos aside and came to the conclusion that we needed a very professional person, someone with the credentials, someone that could dedicate an awful lot of time, because we were students, we're temporary.
There was essentially a student community board or a committee that was put together rather hastily. And and we had to then talk about what we thought the Chicano Studies department should be like. We had no idea, because something like this never occurred before. There's no example, no place to go to that we could model it after. And most important, everybody agreed that we had to bring in somebody to be the chair of this department, and who should that person be. So they asked me to contact Rudy and see if he'd be interested in chairing the department.
Warren Furumoto pointed out to me that, if it was going to get done, it would probably be by a person like myself who knew people in the community, who was active in the community, who was from the San Fernando Valley, and who had a PhD. By the process of elimination, how many people were around who had that background?
He gave us some conditions about his hiring, and he wanted full tenure.
Then I wanted a full professorship, because how are you going to have any power to tell people to go to hell if you didn't have tenure and you didn't have a full professorship? So consequently, for the program to succeed, I had to have both of them. If I didn't have both of them, I couldn't have succeeded, and I wouldn't have come.
So we all kind of agreed to do that, and we had essentially the Vice President of Academic Affairs come, and we discussed that, and he asked, who do we have in mind? We told him, and we told him what the conditions were, and he looked at all of us and says, you got it. We just about fell off our chairs. So I couldn't believe it. He said, that's what you decide you wanted to do. We'll respect that.
The biggest challenge came from the Spanish department. The Spanish department did not want us. They saw us as a threat. In the fall of 1968, the Spanish department came out with an open letter to the campus that they didn't want EOP because they didn't want unqualified Chicanos coming to school here.
And we took it pretty personally, some of us. I mean, that faculty would be that adamant about discrediting the EOP, especially when some of those names are Spanish surnames,
And they had a quasi-fascist demeanor to them, because they didn't want Chicanos, who would almost be considered a semi-native to the field. The administration wanted me to write up 10 course proposals and start the program on those 10 course proposals. Well, I realized that if I only had 10 classes, I would not have any more than 10 classes that I had to hit when the fire was hot. Jose Luis was a student, 17 years old. And he would sit there and he would watch me put 5x8 cards on the floor, planning out the curriculum. Remember, at that time we were working with typewriters, and we weren't working with computers. So I had to type all of these course proposals. They weren't very long, but they were about 4 pages. There were 45 of them. And so I had to type them out. I wasn't getting the work done. The administration had given me a work study student. And so consequently, I didn't even have a secretary. So Julian gave me his assistant to help me type.
I can't believe it. I don't know how many weeks after that, it was not very many. I went to see him just because I was anxious. So, what do you got put together? So he says, over here, and he had this stack, about that much, maybe 40 course proposals put together already, and I went through them and I said, they were almost all perfect. I mean, just the way he laid it out and what he wanted. And I was just stunned.
Rudy turned in all the course outlines. Every one of them was approved.
So next step was to look for faculty.
Under Rudy's leadership, he facilitated the creation of a group called Chicano Affairs Committee.
It had three elements. It had students, it had faculty, and it had community. But a student was a chairperson of that committee. So that committee, called Chicano Affairs Committee, is the one that got together, talked, decided, made decisions, and made their demands or recommendations to the administration. And we told the administration, this is the group that will speak on behalf of Chicanos and the Chicano community. It'll be this body. This is our chairperson.
Every faculty member that was being brought in to be considered for hire had to go through this committee to be interviewed.
And there I'm in a room full of students that were going to ask the questions. And that was the interview. Questions not only about education, questions about my knowledge of the community.
And in the fall is when the Department of Chicano Studies started. I think maybe with 4 or 5 faculty, including my 2 colleagues here who came to this brand new department.
When I hit this campus, there was something else happening, and I'll never forget the first day because I lost all my paperwork and didn't have anything with me when I came, and all I seen was a room full of people that I had never seen so many Chicanos and Chicanas in one room together, my age more or less, and on a university campus, and they were all talking about and interacting.
That first class in '69, if I recall correctly, was probably close to 500 students coming in under special admissions. That was a shock. If you brought in 500 students at that time, students of color, students of different class, you dropped them into this campus. That was a big shock right there.
This is a very new experience for our community in large numbers.
Most students in 1969 knew they were here, and they knew they had deficiencies, and they knew that the only way they were going to get through was with our help.
And I think one of the things that I remember hearing people talk about was the real sense that they had been given a chance, not a second chance. This was a first chance. They'd never had a chance before. This was the first chance you can actually take to do something with your life, because the alternate was Vietnam, work, or who knows what it was nothingness.
We had a lot of kids here, and this is one of the things that taught me is these professors that would, when a kid would go in there, didn't have a good grasp of English and would make them feel like about 2 cents. So I would go into the meeting and make them feel like 2 cents. You see, you use different strategies. Strategies were very important in the first years. I remember, Cleary, who was not a bad president, but he looked like Elmer Fudd. But the guy was brilliant when it came to running a meeting. He was one of the editors of Robert Rules of Law. So he knew Robert's Rules of Law just like, inside and out, you see. So when he used to call a meeting, you knew that he was going to manipulate that meeting. And I couldn't use Rodolfo's rules of law, and because he would call it. So I wanted to adjourn the meeting because the thing on the agenda, he was going to ram it through. And so I told him, I said, "Hey, Jim, did you get laid last night?" And he turned all red, and he adjourned the meeting, you see. And so it was just a matter of what? Of strategies that you used.
So when I came here in '69, there was still an UMAS. So at that time, UMAS changed to Mecha.
And at that point, Mecha was huge. I mean, we're talking about we'd fill the engineering room, I forgot what engineering, 101 at that time. We used to have 75 to 150 students at a meeting, easily, and sometimes even more. We used to protest a lot whenever we didn't get more money for the department, because Rudy says, we got to get up there and say something. So, we gather 100 people together. You could gather 100 people together in 5 minutes. I don't know, you just could. The women that were in Mecha were very much relegated to the fundraising type of activities and more the coordinating efforts. And if we would have a fundraiser, then the women would go make enchiladas and the guys would do, I don't know what the guys did, to tell you the truth. I don't know that I came to the conclusion on my own. I think it was really with a lot of effort on the part of the other women to say, we have to get out there. So at one point in time, I think I just came forward and said, well, I want to be the chair. So Mecha was a fairly large group, and because of that, the compromise was to co-chair it, and with a male. That was Richard Corona. So we co-chaired.
And then Enrique Ramirez was involved also. So it was actually a three-person chairmanship, which worked beautifully.
But at that time, women's issues were not the primary focus. They weren't important. It was important, but it wasn't the primary focus. The primary focus was the Chicano population, because we didn't have our civil rights. Civil rights was really the most important thing to us then.
The gender roles wasn't even a consideration. We would make mention of it, or I would make mention of it. I was pretty much known as a loudmouth. I mean, I was known as being not assertive, that you would use that role now for a woman. I was known as being aggressive. And I didn't beat up anybody physically. I did verbally. Because at that time, I felt that was the only way I could get my point across, was to just be very confrontational and say, you know what, this is wrong, and you have to hear my side of it, or whatever the issue was. And I was one of the few women that was in that type of role, or in that role. Most of the women were younger, they were more inhibited, they didn't like to take the men on. And I was older and I really didn't care. The instructors that were in the department were very cognizant of trying to keep the students that had entered at that time as cohesive as possible, so they made every effort to pull us together for meetings and to make sure that we stayed involved in the community politics.
When I talked to Gerald Resendez, I was telling him, if it wasn't for him, I probably would have wound up dropping out, because you had this basis of Chicanos there and we all have the same interests, but still, you're 18 years old and you're struggling with all these questions you have, and there was a group, we always go in and cry on his shoulder, go in there for therapy.
The beauty of it, though, was that the instruction was unlike any other I had experienced. Instructors would come in and they would rearrange the room so that instead of being lectured to, you had a conversation on a round table, for example.
The classes were important because they were different than other classes I had participated in, and it was about us. It was about us as Chicanos, and that's what was important.
We obtained during the time that I was there the Chicano house. Oh, the first Chicano house got burnt.
I remember that I was giving a speech, and all of a sudden they said, Rudy says, the Chicano house is burning down. And so I rushed over there like everybody else. And it just went up fast. And it was burned down to the ground.
We took it as a very direct attack, of course. That's a place where we hung out, where we had a lot of activity.
Everybody blamed, rightfully or wrongly, the white students on campus.
I remember they all wanted to go get their, weapons and head out to the fraternities, and it was the women, I think, that brought them back in and said, no, we need to do this in a manner that's going to be productive. We need another house, which we did get.
An awful lot of people wanted to strike back. I told them, I said, that's what they want us to do. They want us to go off on a rampage. Why don't we just put armbands and we'll walk around the school, and we won't say anything. And we'll close down the department. And we won't say whether we're going to start the department or not.
And so the call went out. We're going to demonstrate. And it wasn't a demonstration of you're walking and you're yelling and screaming or anything like that. It was a very solemn demonstration, almost like a funeral. And then, it was decided that there was going to be a march through the center of campus. Through the center of campus. The Oviatt Library wasn't there yet. And you walk literally in an angle. And you just saw this line of people just kind of walking very quietly, very solemnly.
We think some people meant to really send us a message and to discourage us, and so we had a reaction that was, I think, surprising to some people. That is that we came together as a family, as a group. The 60s were a moment of a decade of change, tremendous change.
Students held a peaceful protest. The cops came and busted heads. They took us all to jail, but at last I came and made the bed. Chicano bodies piling up out the media.
It's a period of a lot of camaraderie, of family, across communities, across barrios, across states, an identification of ourselves as a community of people stretching across the Southwest, of a movement that might have a greater impact than decades or generations before on changing our position in American society.
That second generation had more of a, ¿qué? Attitude. Fuck you. I'm a citizen. I was born here. My dad went to the service. So, you can't tell me what to do. There was that type of more of an attitude. I'm a Chicano. The term Chicano comes from that second generation.
But of course we weren't just embracing a term, we were embracing a kind of a philosophy, a way of thinking, and implement, a type of thinking that, again, would improve, hopefully, our community.
There was just this energy that was just there.
to have a Chicano Studies department. That was our greatest, I think, accomplishment. And now to think that it's the largest in the nation, I mean, it was not something easy. I mean, remember, there was no Chicano Studies. So that in itself was revolutionary.
It was just a common purpose. You could see it was a focus, a common purpose, and energy.
We were engaging in trying to uplift our people. And we were teenagers. And we gave up all of our free time to do it.
They put a lot of extra time into leaving something for another generation that came after them.
The world changed. I mean, it was a dramatic change.
My name is Gerald Resendez, and I'm a professor of Chicano Studies here at Cal State Northridge.
Evelina Alarcon, and I'm the Executive Director of Cesar y Chavez National Holiday.
My name is Julian Nava.
Maria Avelina Guerra, and I go by Abby Guerra.
My name is Raul Aragon, Assistant Director of the Center for Academic Preparedness.
Jose Luis Vargas, Director, Educational Opportunity Program, better known as EOP.
My name is Diane Velarde Hernandez, and this is San Fernando High School, and I'm the magnet coordinator here.
My name is Maria Teran, and I'm currently employed with the County of Ventura Healthcare Agency as their Human Resources Manager.
I'm Richard Corona. I was born in the Northeast Valley, Van Nuys is where I was born, but I was raised in the city of San Fernando.
My name is Miguel Angel Verdugo.
Okay, my name is Harry Gumbo Jr.
My name is Irene Tovar, and I am the Executive Director of the Latin American Civic Association, better known as LACA.
Okay, my name is Warren Furumoto.
My name is Adolfo Acuna. I'm a professor of Chicano Studies.
My name is Beto Ruiz. I'm a professor of Chicano Studies here at Cal State University, Northridge.